Hi, you guys. My name is Jennifer, and some of you guys know me and some of you don't. I have been a published author with both large and small presses since 1989, and I decided to start exploring film when I found being a novelist and a poet was too isolating. And I started exploring film when I founded an independent studio with my wife 6 years ago. Since then, we've done more than 80 ultra short films. Those are films that are under 10 minutes long. And about half a dozen short films, films that are like about 20 minutes or 30 minutes long. And we've done a dozen features, films that are 90 minutes or longer. One of the things that I've never done with any of the films is I've never done a production journal. If you guys, for instance, have ever read a production journal, a lot of times publishing houses will actually publish production journals, especially if a film does really well. For instance, Pi has a really amazing production journal that was published about it. But a production journal basically walks you through the entire process from like the original idea all the way through the release of the film usually. I've never done something like that before, so I thought perhaps I would share that journey in here in the series somewhere today. So I'm really nervous. I don't think a lot of people realize that because they think I've done enough films and written enough films that I wouldn't find it nerve-wracking, or I wonder if it'll be any good, if things will go wrong. But I do, and it doesn't really matter what the length of the film is. But 2 days ago, I was at the Wonderland Film Anthology event, which is like it's like a film festival event, you know, where a bunch of people get together and you make films in a limited amount of time, and then they compete for awards like Best Film, Best Actor, Best Actress. And while I was there, one of my good friends was also there, named Amber, and she and I were just kind of talking. I mean, the whole group was talking, but then we were talking about, films that I think a lot of folks, we all call them this, Hallmark films, feel-good films, films that leave us feeling uplifted. And she jokingly, talked about if I would ever write one, and that's usually not the place that I go, but I certainly know the appeal of those kinds of films, and I do, interestingly enough, for this film anthology event, I did do a series of 4 short films that were basically the same roles, but different actors playing the roles each time, that ultimately were uplifting. And even though they had a serious message, I thought, they were ultimately uplifting. And I jokingly, Amber said, you should write one and I should star in it, and it should just be a holiday film, and a Hallmark style, Hallmark uplifting film. And I said, yeah, in my extra time, I could write that, and we were joking back and forth, not about any kind of plot or anything like that, anything more than a Hallmark film. But then, and I told her, I could write it for you and Eric. Eric is probably one of the most incredible guys I've ever met. It really is kind of like the perfect man. And I would love to call him a friend, but I don't get to spend as much time with Eric. So it's like, I think of him secretly as my friend, but shh, don't tell him that. Because I just think he's like super awesome. But, and I say, yeah, I could write one for you and Eric. And poor Eric is probably like, please stop casting me, please, just leave me be. But, and she said, though, there's like no lesbian holiday films. And I had never actually stopped and considered that, because I mean, there's lots of films with lesbian characters. And I personally pride myself on being able to write lots of different characters, and their sexuality usually isn't the focal point of who they are. It's an element, you know, pretty much everyone has asexuality, even asexual is a sexuality. But that's just part of a facet of them. But when Amber said that, I was kind of like, you know, she has a really good point there, and I'm a relatively conservative person politically. And I don't actually consider myself a feminist in the way that I see feminism shown out in the world and projected onto me. But I did see her point, and it is true. You know, a lot of us, it doesn't matter what lifestyle we live, a lot of us, or if you want to argue how we were born or whatever it is, a lot of us want something uplifting and inspiring, and especially during the holidays, which can be hard. I mean, first it's winter, it's dark, and also sometimes it's hard to interact with our extended families. There's a lot of stress there. I know that's a stereotype, but it's also, you know, a truth for a lot of people. And I guess all of these classic and all of these new holiday films that come out every year, they do say to us, you know, you're going to have to gender swap if you really want to identify. And it's hard for me because growing up and as an adult, I never was someone who was looking for like lesbian characters in fiction or in movies. I didn't go, well, where are the lesbian superheroes and where are the lesbian this? But I grew up with two moms. So I was kind of like, well, there's the representation, all the representation I needed are right there. And I love my parents, but I'm kind of like, I don't need any more of that. That's fine. It's totally good. But I know that is not the case for the vast majority of people, whether they're looking for characters that mirror their sexuality or their gender alignment or their race or just whatever it is, their size, their age in a lead, whatever it is. And I don't know, there was something about that, you know, here's Amber sitting across from me and she's making this really simple but very powerful point. And that was 48 hours ago. So, I had to really focus on the anthology. You know, my job was to direct the majority of the films, not all of them, thank goodness, but the majority of them, and to shoot all but two of them. And I keep forgetting exactly how many we had. I want to say we had 15, but more than a dozen. We had more than a dozen films. So my mind was certainly on the task in front of me as opposed to on a feature that I'm definitely not scheduled to do, is not in my schedule, but it definitely got in my brain. And a lot of little elements started to come together the way things do for writers without me sitting down. I don't develop stories with someone. Or with a team, a development team. I don't sit down and hash out ideas from nothing. But I do like to talk to people that I trust. And in this case, though I do talk to people that I trust, but it usually comes very late in the process. I'm sorry, I needed to finish that sentence. So, you know, since this was very early in the process, I wasn't even supposed to be consciously thinking about it. I found myself in this location where we were, which was this really nice rustic kind of a cottage. I wouldn't call it a cabin. It's like a cottage. And it has this gorgeous floor plan, really high ceilings. I really love high ceilings. It has an open staircase. I am a sucker for an open staircase. And the bedrooms were situated in just a very particular way. The arrangement of the beds was very particular. Again, that open staircase and the really high ceilings. And I started to kind of picture scenes in this feature film, and they just were coming to me completely unbidden. And I saw the characters very, very clearly. I saw, the character that Amber would play, and I saw the character that her little son, Kellen, would play. And I saw characters that my wife Brienne would play, and the character that Brienne would play, and the character that our kids would play. I really like casting Brienne and Amber together as a couple because they have a very comfortable presence with each other. They interact very comfortably on camera. And that is not something to take for granted. I do believe that the best actors and actresses can play gay, straight, whatever. That shows range, and it shows that you actually understand that humans are humans at their core. When I have an actor who turns down a role because they are gay and the character is straight, or they are straight and the character is gay, I lose a lot of respect for them, because I'm like, why is this that much of an issue? I mean, especially because I'm not talking about turning down a role with like a sex scene or even kissing or anything like that. I understand that some actors say no to anything like that, but this is just showing the character. So that always makes me a little sad, and I don't recast those people then. But the other thing is, some people call it chemistry, but I don't think it's about chemistry. I think it's about skills. I don't think you have to have chemistry. That makes it sound like there is something intimate or sexual or romantic, or like if those actors were single, they would be together or something like that. That's not the case. The actors that I find who play couples really well on camera, they don't have chemistry. They have they know themselves. They know what they look like when they're interested in someone. They know how to show interest in someone. The little body language changes, and how we will look them more in the eye. We pay attention when they speak. We ask them questions. We're listening more than we're talking to them. It's those little things like that. The way if they step closer to you, do you step away? That kind of thing. It's those little small things. It's the body language. It's the tone of voice. So it's that skill set. So I feel like folks that are mature and self-aware know how to show a couple, or know how to show attraction. I don't think they have to have like any kind of personal one-on-one chemistry. And likewise, you can have people that have great friendships off camera, get along seemingly wonderfully, but you put them together as a couple and they're acutely uncomfortable with each other. They can't get into their characters. It's awkward for everyone. Their own either sizeism, ageism, whatever it is, starts showing through them as a person. You see them kind of like, oh, I wouldn't be with this person. And you're just like, no. Or they're simply, this isn't a role for them. They're not ready to play an authentic couple on screen. But I know that with Amber and Brienne, I can cast them. And so I started seeing them as the two leads. And then that idea of kind of the mixed family, the what is it called, blended family, the kids from two different families, and what would bring these folks together, and these two women together, and who are their children? Because as you guys know, or maybe you don't know, because maybe you don't even know who I am, that kind of thing. But kids play a huge role in all the films that I write, and that's where mine and Brienne's studio began, was making shows for kids. So that was pretty huge. So I knew that the two teens and the one preteen had to have really big parts, and they needed to be real people, not tropes. And there was no work. The characters were just there, and I knew their names. I knew what they liked. I knew what their dreams were. I knew what the B plot was, the secondary plot of the kids. I knew what the mom's plots were. I knew what their backstories were. I knew that both of them had been married before. I knew who they'd been married to and what those people were like. I knew who would play them. I knew who would be the person that would play kind of the catalyst character. I knew all the things that I wouldn't do. All the tropes that I think, I don't want to say amateur, I want to say well-meaning filmmakers often try to add diversity into their films, but they then fall back on tropes that make them personally comfortable. They somehow insinuate themselves. Insinuate? I'm not sure if that's exactly the word that I want there, but they slither their way into the story, and I'm always like, that's not authentic, and you've made this into something that's it's masturbatory. It's made for you instead of for viewers. It's made for you to bolster who you are instead of a story that is speaking to your audience. So I already had this like long mental list of all of the stereotypes and tropes and cliches that I didn't want to use, and then all of these character traits for all of the characters. And so then the 48 hours passed, and I hadn't said anything to anyone. And finally, I said to Amber, I think you've talked me into it. I think I would be willing to write a holiday feature film that you would star in. And she said, well, that's awesome, and that was one of my goals for 2018. And I'm like, well, there you go. And that was it. And it was really actually amazing, because she's not the kind of person who was like, tell me about the character. Okay, so like, I really want to make sure you have this kind of scene, and I really want to make sure you have that kind of scene. And it was just like the trust and the confidence that I wasn't going to give her something, where she's relegated to a relatively shallow role, or it's just not very good. She just was absolutely calm and confident. And I hadn't even told her yet, that I wanted Eric to be in it. I wanted Kellen to be in it, and Maxwell and Faith, my kiddos, and Brienne. I think Amber probably assumed that I was going to cast her opposite Brienne, because again, I think they work really well on camera. But then we were driving back from the event, and it's a 3-hour drive, and Brienne was driving, and I got out my little, this is my work journal. It's just like a little lined journal type thing, and it's where I can jot down everything from a to-do list for that day to I've written entire episodes of series in here, basic ideas. If there's something that I've worked out, like something for the website, or buttons were coded, or we had to create a system for viewing and renting videos, stuff like that. If there's like notes or things that I need to do, little technical things, then I'll put them in there. And so it's not private. I leave it out, all around. Though sometimes I do write private thoughts, but not that I just don't think that anyone in my household would pick it up, that kind of thing. But sometimes I'll work out a thought about something, like, why did this happen with this person, and what could I have done differently? And I kind of like work it out on paper, and that's just kind of always been my thing. But I started writing this journal, and I wrote the arc of the film and little bios for each of the characters, and some scenes, and even a little bit of sample dialogue. I think I wrote for probably 2 hours, and I just got it was like happier and happier the more I wrote down. And I'm trying to find it for you guys. Names, all the characters' names. And I hadn't had a title at first. The title that I really like, I almost always title my stuff first, interestingly enough. Like, I'll get an idea, and then I title it, and then I do the rest of the work. But I actually bounced between several titles for this one before settling on the one that I wanted. And, but it just looks like this. And so I went through 6 titles, but this was the one that finally tied the whole film together with this particular symbolism and these 4 different events that occur that then accumulate in the final moments, and that all make the title make sense, and that means something to me. So it was just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5 pages. And notes on, like I said, the character bios and the milestones. I have always, well, at least since I was in my early 20s, I've followed the Robert McKee method. So I use 8 milestones in my writing. So I do outline things. I don't tend to write solely on inspiration. I don't find that relaxing. I don't find it inspirational. I think the only thing that I write on inspiration is poetry. But everything else I do chart out. I plan my pacing and my milestones and so how the plot is going to unfold. So I did that for the film, and then we got home and we said hello to all of our animals. We have like 20-something animals, and then we decided that we probably needed some groceries. So we went out, and on our way to the grocery store, we live a little bit rurally, so we always have a bit of a drive, and I told the basic plot to Brienne, and then I told her about those 4 moments that lead up to the final moment that brings these 2 families together. And I got all teary, and I had to stop, and I got all choked up, and I said, it's just because this truth that this character came to that is the truth. That is at the core of who we all are, and it doesn't matter whether we're gay or straight or whatever, this is at the core of everything. And I looked over at her, and I think I'd been kind of nervous to look over at her, and she's driving, right? So, and her eyes are all full of tears, and she's like, oh, you're just making me feel all the feels right now. And I was like, okay, that's it. I got it. And then if I had any uncertainty at that point, she turns away from the bank. We had slept at the bank first. She turns away from the bank, turns onto the freeway, and she goes, and to show the victorious completion of this particular arc between the kids, you should do, can you see? She said, not you should do. She didn't say you should, can you see this? And I was just like, yes, oh my gosh, yes, exactly that. And I thought to myself also, actually, I said this aloud. I said, Kellen will love that because he's always talking to Amber and Eric about the after scene. It's called the after scene, you guys, the after scene or the after film, the little thing that happens, after. So I had the film ending in one way, and then you get some small vignettes on half the screen, in a square screen as the credits roll to the side. And then this idea that Brienne said, I'm like, and then that is the after scene. It then goes back to a full screen, and we get this one final shot that really makes sure that everyone understands where these characters are heading. And it ties everyone together so beautifully and brings the entire film full circle, and in the best possible ways. And so I knew that this is going to be different. This film is going to be different. And so I thought, well, maybe I will join the brave cast of Somewhere Today and do a little production journal on this particular film and let you guys come with me on this journey, because it's not a film that there's time allotted in my schedule. So I'm going to have to do it basically on the sly, if that makes any sense. I mean, I'm self-employed, right? So, but on the sly, I have to be able to get all my other work done, and I homeschool both the kids, and did I mention all those animals? And we're running a production company, and in January I switch over to relaunching and rebranding our print division, which was actually founded in 1989. So that's really huge. But I want to do this. And I think it would be wrong not to do this because I think it's actually an incredibly important idea. And so I am going to take you guys with me. So I don't know what my next episode here will be about, but anytime that I make any progress, I'm going to share it with you. And I know I can't give away too many details because some people are jerks in the world, which really sucks. Maybe I've even already said too much. I think some people wouldn't even have said some of the things that I have, but I will say I don't want to live like that. I don't want to live fearful that someone else is going to take an idea of mine, because the truth of the matter is I am confident enough to know that, and also I think intelligent enough to understand that everyone can put their own spin on something, and I like the spin I put on things. I don't have a lot of confidence in how I present or how I look or my education or anything like that, but I do have a lot of confidence in my skills as a writer. That's I feel like where I excel. So I'm not too afraid that someone's going to walk off with this. And I guess I should tell you guys the title, right? And so the title is The Space Between Us. And your fun fact for the day is you can't copyright titles. So you can literally put a book out there called Lord of the Rings. So it's okay. You don't need to comment or message me if there's already something called The Space Between Us. But that is my title, and I'm sticking to it because it ties beautifully into not only the characters, but into a universal truth that I truly believe with all my heart. And I don't believe in a lot of universal truths. So I'll see you guys next time. Bye.